Sure.
Hi everyone, we're going to get started in just a minute here. Going to give everybody a chance to settle in. We're really excited for today. All right, before I turn it over to Polly, I just wanted to go over a couple of things. My name's Lauren. I'm from the Learning Disabilities Association of America, and we are so excited to host this webinar. So I just wanted to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, and if you're not able to make it for the full time, or if you aren't able to make it at all, we will be sending a recording to all of the people who have registered, so you can expect that in your email. And then Polly's also going to provide us with a copy of her slides today, so those will be included with the email as well. And I just wanted to let everybody know that if you have a question, either if it's a technical question for me or a question for Polly, Polly will be taking questions at the end. You can put those in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, so we'll be able to find them rather than the chat where they can get a little bit lost. So I'm going to turn it over to Polly, who is going to give us a great presentation. So Polly, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. And go here. So, okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, awesome. So this is the LDA webinar, Transforming Handwriting Struggles with Expert OT Techniques You Can Do at Home. And I'm Polly Benson. I'm an occupational therapist. And I would love, if we have a chat going, I would love for people to put in the chat whether they're a parent or a teacher or how you are involved with LDA. So I think that would be awesome. Let's see here. So first of all, I just wanted to play a quick video, and this is an example of a family that I work with often, and so wanted you to kind of see if this is a story that you can relate to.
Introduce yourself. So I'm Mandy. I'm Court's mom. Court is our 8-year-old third grader, or actually technically fourth grader. And we are old neighbors of Polly's. And he's my oldest and first. So we are learning about school as we go and all the things that go along with it. I feel like there's a problem here that I don't know what it is. And that if I don't stay on top of it and put my own time and effort into that, it's gonna grow. Yes, it's gonna grow and grow, and then we're gonna get older and have bigger concerns to worry about. And I don't feel like I'm able to get a good grasp on what he's getting in school. A patient who was at OT, I was talking to her at her visit, and she said, well, handwriting is ingrained by third grade. You really can't change it. And I kind of panicked. This is what your child's doing. Like, they show you the writing journals and the progression, but I still was kind of very clueless as a mom as far as like what's normal, what should we be doing. Still noticed we weren't making letters the way I learned, but I didn't know that's normal. We've had great teachers every year, great school. I was told he's a boy, he's young, he might just be rushing, it'll come, be patient. Again, lots of reassurance. He's smart, he's doing great, his math and science is excellent. I asked a little bit about testing because I don't know what sort of standardized testing. All I can compare it to is when I was a child.
Right.
And so I don't know, like, I've never gotten like where he falls on scales, and they're like, oh, he doesn't do that until third grade. But yeah. Just lots of reassurance that he's doing great and there's no worries. Don't worry about the handwriting. In second grade, we brought it up at his teacher conference, and she said, oh, he'll start typing soon. Don't worry. And then I'm like, okay. And then third grade, we had heard is a really important year for academic development, and that it's a big year when you really start seeing discrepancies in academics and performance, and you really need to stay on top of it. So I tried to okay, what are we doing? And that's when I really did notice that some of his handwriting compared to his peers, because they were doing like group projects, it was not the same. At his fall conference, she was like, oh, we're about to start cursive, he'll be typing more. But I was like, I really think we need to start really focusing on the legibility of his handwriting, because we're still not forming letters like top to bottom, left to right, on a paper with the lines. He wasn't touching the lines. I just felt like it should be there by then. And I wasn't really seeing any change from kindergarten to third grade. And I started worrying about like, what about math? And we're doing higher level math and things need to line up neatly. And what if he starts losing points academically because it looks like he doesn't have the right answer because it's not logical. And so I started feeling like I was getting reassurance every year, but I still was feeling like something wasn't right. I don't want my child to fall through the cracks. Really even figure out who is in network, how to make an appointment other than a private evaluation was going to be like $250 and then $150 a session. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to spend that being a ton working parents and trying to have fun at home. Yeah.
So that is one of my families. And let me see if I can get to the next slide here. So did any of that relate with any of you in the chat? Was there a part of Mandy's story that you've heard before with your own children or with your own students? What I wanted to start with is we need to understand what the handwriting challenges are. So this particular mom, her son did not qualify for OT. She knew there was a problem, but she didn't know what to do. And so Mandy Court and I worked together for a year, and I'll have a video at the end. So he's kind of a case study for what we did with working on his fine motor skills and his handwriting skills. But first we need to understand what were some of the challenges that they had. So if you want to put some of those in the chat, some of the challenges that I see was his motivation and his confidence. He noticed that he was not writing as neatly as his peers. The teachers said things like, "It's okay, we're going to be typing soon," or "Don't worry about it, he's a boy." So you might have heard some of these things. And I want to encourage you that is a lot of that is true. But there are some things we can do. And so I wanted to make sure to share those with you today. So some of the reasons that we have messy handwriting might be fine motor skills. It could be their visual motor integration, cognitive skills, could have to do with their age. They might be young and not developed. They could have a learning disability or some type of a physical condition. A lot of times it's the writing environment. We think we need to take away a lot of stimulation from kids. And so we darken rooms so that they're not in sensory overload. But when you darken a room, you have trouble seeing what you're writing about. And so we want to make sure that we have task lighting. So you want to look at the writing environment. And also we look at the stress and fatigue. I laugh at that video every time I see Court and him yawning. That was a morning appointment and he was already yawning. So you know that the students are struggling and they're coming to school tired. They're very busy families. They are getting a lot of other homework. And in this particular case, he wasn't getting the support he needed at school. So first of all, we are going to talk about some of the self-esteem impacts. So studies have shown that students that have messy handwriting are embarrassed, and it shows that other people have negative perceptions of that child, even though that child may be very, very smart. Was one of the things that Mandy said. She said, "I know he's smart, he's capable of more," but he was not academically challenged. It was just handwriting. And so teachers tend to look at that student and they feel bad, and that's okay, but it's not a lot of time that they have to fix it or to help them. These students often have social difficulties. They're considered regular ed, but they're avoiding handwriting. They're frustrated by it. And there is some tester bias. So we've seen where we have two exact essays. One is handwritten neatly and one is handwritten poorly. And studies have shown that even though they have the exact same words, that the essay that is written poorly, as far as handwriting, will get a lower score. And it's a tester bias. People have bias. We all have bias. So what can we do about that? Well, this was another study that showed that not only was the less legible test that received a lower score was evident, but there was a thing called the writer effect. And the writer effect talks about how handwriting consumes so much cognitive information. So If you do have the luxury of reaching out to an OT or a speech therapist that can look at the cognitive skills of that student, when you are thinking about, okay, how do I hold this pencil? How hard do I grasp it? How do I make that letter A? How do I connect it if I'm writing cursive to letters C, D, and E? We're also looking at, okay, what am I writing about? And I have to have a capital, and I have to have a period. I have to have uppercase and lowercase letters, and all that thinking requires so much cognitive skills that the student has difficulty with their handwriting fluency. So we want to try to help them make handwriting more automatic. And then when it becomes more fluent, then we can work on the actual content of the handwriting. Of note, one of the things that Mandy said was that her teacher said, we're going to be typing soon. Well, they did a study in 2014 where if students took notes by hand versus students that took notes on the typewriter, the students that took notes by hand retained more information. And we often hear in this world, why do we need handwriting? We're not teaching cursive anymore. We don't need handwriting. We've got technology. We've got typing. We've got voice to text. I agree with all that. I believe that there are certain cases where that is needed, but this study proves that it's important to still have handwriting in addition to writing a note for a parent or a grandparent, thank you note, a card, a note of encouragement, a grocery list. There's all sorts of reasons why we still need handwriting. So we want to talk about what are those foundational skills that you need for strength, coordination, and dexterity. So posture is huge. And you can see here some different pictures of Court and the way that he was sitting, leaning on his hands. So if you have a student that leans on their hands or leans down to the side, or they're trying to write like this, then they probably have some core strength limitations. What you want to do is look at something I have as one of my resources is a handwriting posture checklist. What is the table height? Is it too high? Is it too low? Are their feet on the floor? Is their helper hand holding the paper and then their writing hand writing the letters? The helper hand doesn't belong in the lap. We want to look at the slant. So if you have a student in bright lights, then there can be a glare on the paper. And so we sometimes can offer a clipboard or some sort of a slant board that will help them to take that glare off that paper. And then we might need special paper, we might need special pencils or things like that. So some of that we can find information by talking to an OT, but if you don't have the luxury of an OT, then it's up to us as parents and teachers to research that. So first of all, your foundational skills posture, you want to make sure that your student is not only sitting upright and has that strength, but that they don't have a glare on their paper. Another foundational skill is grasp, and these are some of the developmental grasps that you'll see. There is the power side of the hand, which is the pinky, and the ring finger is the power side of the hand. So when you're grasping something, the power comes from this side of your hand. The precision side of your hand is the ability to stabilize everything else and just have those little motor movements in the pencil. And so some of these foundational grasps are very normal with development, but we don't want the student to stay there. Typically, the development of a grasp starts with 10 months where they're doing a pincher grasp. 12 to 15 months, they have the palmar supinate grasp. Sometimes you'll see students hold their pencil upside down. That's normal up through 2 to 3 years. And then we start getting to the more efficient grasp. So quadrupod means 4 fingers of point of contact on the pencil. And tripod grasp is just 3. So holding on, you've got 2 down here. Now, if you've noticed that one of your students is not grasping the pencil right, then we can give them something to hold in their hand, say like a ball or a puff ball. And they're going to hold that with the power side of their hand. And we're going to try to isolate the right side and the left side of their pencil grasp. But we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. So, like I said, the skilled side of the hand is the thumb, index, and middle finger. The power side is the ring and pinky. That provides stability. So if you see a student that's doing a lot of writing with their shoulder, they're not stabilized. If you see a lot of elbow movement, that's not stabilized. We want to get all the way down where we're stabilizing even the wrist and just the fingers are moving. So a lot of times that's a basic foundational skills that a lot of parents or even some teachers or OTs may not know. So we want to help that student get a clear separation of the sides of their hand so that they know that they're ready to hold that pencil. Okay, the palmar arch. This is what is in the middle of your hand. And let me find my little dice here. Here they are. So if you can roll dice and hear them click, then that is a palmar arch. It has to be soft and it has to hear the click. So if you have a student that rolls dice like this and there's no noise, then they need to work on that palmar arch. And the reason you need the palmar arch is to hold the pencil. Can you see there how there's a hole inside of here? And that pencil is only touching my fingers and a little bit right here on my hand. Some students might hold their pencil straight up and down and it's not back in the web space. So we want to make sure that we have that back in the web space. But palmar arches allow you to grab something of different size and helps you to have that skill of grasp. So helps you to know how hard to grasp. One of the ways that we can improve our palmar arch and the strength of that is a little tennis ball buddy. And what we like to do is have him eat the dice so we can give him different things to eat, like the dice, and then the kids have to shake it and then roll them out. Another thing that they can do is feed them mini erasers, and a lot of our little mini erasers are food, so that's kind of fun. They can eat puff balls, all sorts of things. They can eat pennies and coins, so that's an activity that you can do with your student. Okay, moving on to letter legibility, we have students that are working on formation and then spacing, sizing, and alignment. So in order to make your letters legible, we don't necessarily all have to form the letter the same way, but the final product of that formation needs to look like a number 4 or a letter F or whatever we're trying to do. One of the things I like to pinpoint with older students is, say, for instance, there's a letter N and an H. And the difference between an N and an H is a tiny little line. And so if we can just focus on that one letter grouping, is your N short and your H tall, that's going to help a long way towards legibility, because are we talking about a house or a mouse? Right? So you want to make sure that that student has that tall letter legibility, that extra little piece at the top to have a house. Another thing that really helps legibility is spacing. So one of the things as OTs, what we teach is spaghetti and meatball spacing. So if you have spaghetti spaces, those are the spaces between each letter. And then the meatball spaces are spaces between each word. And we have lots of spacing techniques. You might have heard of the spaceman. You might have heard of finger spacing. There's lots of spacing techniques. So even though your sentences might be crowded, it's going to help the legibility of a word if we have the correct spacing. So trying to think of a good example. If we had the word, let's say tin. So if the T looks like it's part of the previous word and then you have IN, you're going to have a hard time reading that word as one word, tin. So being able to address spacing might be where you want to start with your student. Sizing, I mentioned that with the N, the M, the H. Maybe the closure might be your problem with a student. So if your student doesn't close the letter A and leaves it open, it looks like a U. So you can go from cat to cut really quickly when you're reading legibility. So if you can identify that one little thing that we're going to work on is closing the letter A, then that's going to help that letter legibility. Finally, alignment. So not only are letters placed on a line where our letter Y has a descending letter, it goes below the line. Sometimes we call them drop down letters. Sometimes we call them underground letters or worm letters, or we might call them underwater letters. Other times we have tall letters that need to go all the way to the top. All our capitals are tall letters. All our medium-sized letters need to stay below the fence. I love to teach the word fence because the dashed line, just that one simple statement, but we do teach our student top line, middle line, bottom line, or baseline, how they sit on the line. In addition to when we're working at math, we have to line up the ones columns, the tens columns, the hundreds columns. And so helping this student to line things up in math is also going to help them line things up in handwriting. So we do have a handwriting neatness checklist. This is also one of my free resources. And a student is going to be more engaged in their writing if they can self-correct. So where you can look at as a parent or a teacher, where did they start their letter? Did they start it at the bottom? I don't like to lose sleep over you have to start your letters at the top. But what I do like to point out is if you're starting your letter E too high, then it's never going to be under the fence. So we're doing different techniques on where you start that letter to teach letter start points. How hard are they pressing? Maybe what is the sequence of how they make that letter? If they make it backwards, but it's still a letter E, if they make this the capital letter and they make the two first lines, it's an F, but they got to get that third line for the capital E. You know, just things like that. We're going to look at how precise are they and where are they placing that letter on the line. Sometimes we have pressure issues. So your student might be pressing too hard and breaking the pencils. They might be not pressing hard enough and it's a very light. Also erasing. Erasing is so important. So we're not just crossing out and keep going, although there is times that maybe you want to do that to save time, but working on precision erasing or even using like a big pencil eraser and grasping it and getting some hand strengthening. Practice erasing. We don't want to erase through the paper and we don't want to erase everything. We have students that become obsessed with erasing. We don't want to do that, but we do want to teach erasing skills. Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to erase it. So that's something that we teach in my world as well. Okay. Next slide here. So some handwriting strategies and techniques I'm going to take you through now to work on some things I've kind of pulled out already, but we're going to work on letter formation, spacing, sizing, alignment, and things like that. So first, the 5 C's of handwriting instruction include the correct formation. Does it look right when it's done? The consistency of their letter formation. Are their hands controlled? Is the pencil controlled? Are they comfortable where they're writing? And what does their confidence look like? So signs that you might see some fine motor challenges. They have difficulty holding their pencil or an awkward grasp. Maybe they have the low endurance we talked about if they're slouching and they're not sitting upright for their writing tasks. Do they prefer their parent to assist them with things like grooming, brushing their teeth, dressing, their buttons, their zippers, things like that? If they avoid tasks when they're seated that involve their hand use, maybe they don't like to play seated games, or maybe they're not interested in arts and crafts and pencil and scissors tasks. So those are some things that you might find that kids with fine motor challenges, they tend to avoid things like that. Okay, now I'm going to take you through some quick diagnoses of what you might see in these different handwriting samples. So for instance, handwriting neatness checklist, there's it is on the right. What do you see? If you want to type into the chat, I see some of your questions as well. We're going to answer the questions at home. But what do you see maybe on this piece of paper? What might be some of the issues that we would want to address? Overwriting, good. That's a very good one. What else do you see? Staying on the line. Yeah, you see he goes up in the air. Spacing's definitely an issue. Can you see on the on any of the first 4 lines where the letters C, L, and A, they're all the same height. So our C and A should be short letters and the L should be a tall letter. So it's some of those things that, like, let's just work on that for a little bit and train that student. What is a tall, short, and medium-sized letter? Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, on this particular student, I wrote out a sentence. She wanted to write about going to PE and doing her hula hoop competition. So what do you see in this example? Okay, so we do see that she's got some uppercase letters mixing. She's using an uppercase A. Her slant, yes, there's some slanting on there. Drifting up, very good. Her baseline alignment, yeah, so she's not using the line. So then below I drew some lines for her to practice on. And what worked really well for this student was just a double line and stay within that boundary. And since my double line was straight, then she was able to write and we did hula hoop. Now this is a special needs student and she needed a lot more training on her specific writing, but you can see that it starts to become more legible when we keep it all a consistent size. Okay, next slide. Okay, this one is kind of fun to decipher, but we're not working on deciphering today as much as I just want you to look at the handwriting. So again, there was no lines for this student. We probably want to provide them lines. We're looking at spelling and inventive spelling. I think it says the video doesn't talk much about their much is spelled M-A-C-H. Maybe we talk about, yeah, first we need to learn to make sure the spelling's right. But this particular student, there's a lot of cognitive skill going on. Let's talk about food, stay healthy, and want to eat. The video and tech talk about food. And so, yes, this student is trying to come up with their ideas at the same time as writing. So in this particular student, I would prefer to let them tell me what they want to say. Let me write it out for you, and then they can copy it. We take that cognitive skill, that hard thinking, all those different things. How do I form my letter? What am I trying to say? Take that all away and let's practice handwriting. Let's practice letter legibility. This student does have some spacing between their words, but there's a couple that overlap. And so we would talk maybe a little bit about spacing, but I think ideally we want to reduce the cognitive skill or impact on this student by making it easier and letting them handwrite. So yes, I love that you said on a positive note, it's sort of spatially organized and flows. Definitely, we always want to be positive and help the student and tell them what they're doing well. Okay, this student, what are we looking at? Boy, isn't it different to see that last student that writes so light and this student that writes so dark? There's erasing and writing over top. All the letters are the same. This particular student was Court. So this was Court's handwriting. And he has the ability to size his letters, but they're all the same. He's got heavy pressure. Why does he have that pressure? That's where you have an OT that can come in and help to see what we can do to change the pressure. Maybe that student is craving deep pressure. That's where we're going to get into OT. But for this particular student, this is a second grade student, and it's just very consistently the same size. So we're going to try to work on sizing differentiation. So this was Court. This was a handwriting sample. And this was when he came to me, he was just finished third grade. So this must have actually been one of his third grade samples. Okay, got a few more of these to show you. Okay, so personal narrative on a student. Again, this was Court. He's starting to understand a little bit more about trying to size his letters. So you can see in the first row, his letter A, M, E, H, O, M, E, they're kind of shorter. So he's starting to kind of understand that. Now we're going to look at more spacing. We want to try to make it a little bit more cleanly spaced so the reader can understand what you're saying and so that you can read it back and understand what you're saying. Okay, so here on the top is Court's pre-example, and at the bottom is his after he did some training with me. So now you can see how we're just giving it a little bit of spacing between the sentences, between the words. This was completely independent on his own. And it's not perfect, but it's legible. It's more legible. And that's what we're trying to teach the student is how to help your writing be more legible. And what that does is leads to improved confidence. And what that does is improve his grades because he's more confident about what he can do. And yeah, what a difference. Thanks for saying that. So nice. I mean, I love to see progress with students. Okay, and just one more example here. Again, no adherence to the lines. This student is a high school student. She was in a special education classroom, inconsistent sizing. So she's been writing on notebook paper probably for many, many years and just maybe was never really taught about the lines. So let's take a little moment to talk about what the lines are. Maybe we draw some lines on top of the lines. Maybe we use handwriting paper for her. Just there's lots of different techniques to try with this student. But what we want to do is maybe teach the student what the lines mean, and then maybe she can write neater from there. Okay, this was a middle school student, and again, we're looking at some spelling, we're looking at sizing of letters, we're looking at their pencil precision and pencil points. Are they erasing? What I liked about this one was talking about the left edge alignment. So how many of you were ever taught in school what the red lines meant on the notebook paper? The red line is where you start, and most of the time there's a red line on the right, and that's where you slow down and you stop and go to the next line. So sometimes the kids don't understand that that red line's there for a reason. I was never taught about the red line. It just kind of was understood that you knew what that meant. So the red line is where we start. Make sure every line starts at the red line if we're going to work on alignment. Okay, so what are the approaches that we can do to have fine motor success? Lots of fine motor activities. So this is my favorite part of the seminar. I'm going to show you some certain things that you can have. So my first item is the tongs. And these tongs are great for hand strengthening. You can hold them in different ways. So you can hold them more like your pencil, or if you want to work on more of the power side of the hand, if your student has weakness, then we can do this and use that power side of the hand. We can pick up things like our ball. We can pick up our different things to put in the tennis ball buddy. So for instance, mini erasers are some of my absolute favorite items. And I do have a free handout right now that's going around 15 things to do with mini erasers for fine motor skills. And one of them is feeding the tennis ball buddy. So now we can add the tongs where we pick up the mini eraser and we drop it into the mouth. So we're working on bilateral coordination. We're looking on hand strengthening on both hands. And if that's too difficult, then we can just pick them up. Maybe you want to work on pinch skills. So we can pinch and put that into the tennis ball buddy's mouth. Dice games, we talked about that. Eyedroppers are great. We can dip colored water and get some great pinching there. Finger play songs. So different, go to YouTube for kids, and there's finger play songs where we can do different activities and we learn, or maybe it's, you know, counting finger play songs. So things like that. Bilateral activities are very important for handwriting and cutting skills because we don't just cut with one hand, right? We take our scissors, which I have here, and we hold the paper with the other hand. So when we're cutting, we're going to cut up on the paper. We always cut up. We want the thumbs on top. And so that's a good activity that's bilateral. We can also rip the paper. And we don't just rip once, but we rip twice. Have them make some confetti for fun to be able to throw around. Keeping a balloon in the air is a fun bilateral activity. Blowing and catching bubbles. Using a ruler or a stencil, you have to hold the ruler down and you have to draw the line on the ruler and hold that in place. Or stencils are fun because you can trace inside. Stencils used to frustrate me as a kid because I couldn't always, the thing always moved. Well, that was because my hand was weak. So we want that helper hand to be strong too. And another fun thing that we can do is go to the dollar store and get a ice cube tray. And so now we can practice putting one mini eraser in each little hole. And I always have them work left to right because we write left to right. We do the top row, then the middle row, then the bottom row. Don't have them do it willy-nilly. Have them put them in the row one at a time, and then we can have them take them out. Now this cute little mini eraser is a little spaceship, and I have one that's a little spaceman. So if that's something you're interested in, I can include that in all the orders that come from LDA. So I'm going to give you guys a special coupon, and that'll be in the comments on the video when we post that. And I will include one of those little spacemen for free. Okay, so what else do we have? Hand strengthening activities. So if they are not stabilized in their shoulders, things like donkey kicks, wheelbarrow walking, animal walks, chair push-ups, so where they get their hands and they push up on their chair and they're strengthening their arms that way. Having them push and pull against you, row your boat. Those are all great for upper strengthening, upper body core strengthening. Have the student work on a vertical surface or near vertical, which basically means vertical. So if your student's writing on the board, that's going to strengthen their shoulders more than writing at tabletop. Having them work at a vertical surface is going to change the extension in their hand. So many of our kids now are writing like this because they're used to typing and technology and things like that, and the iPads, and I get it. I always have a student that is on an iPad use a stylus because it helps them with that hand wrist extension. Sprayers and tweezers are great. Clothespins. So these cost like 99 cents. You can get 100 of them at the store. And I have these little strange plastic rings. And so one of my activities is just putting one of these on each one. You can hook them to the edge of the ice cube tray. You can hook them onto each other, hook them on a piece of paper. You can put little letters on them and match the uppercase and lowercase letters. Do it on a plate. Write all the lowercase letters on the plate, and then they have to match the upper or vice versa. Putty. Putty is one of my favorites. So I just have some putty in a container, and inside the putty are little beads. So first of all, I always teach the student, get out all the little beads. And then once we get all the little beads out, that's working on all that fine motor strength. We're going to work on some grip strength and make a ball. Turn the ball into a hot dog. Get that hot dog into a snake, rolling it on the table. We're going to pinch that snake, go all the way down to the end. We're then going to roll it up and make a little snail. And then we're going to smash the snail into a pancake. You can do it with 2 hands. You can do it on top of a table with 1 hand. And then we go back and hide all the beads back inside of the putty. And we start over again. And it just repeats and repeats. And it's not just, oh, I'm trying to do pancakes. There's a certain order that you can do, and that can help. Card churning is another activity. And not only that, if you have cards, we can face them one way or the other. We can sort them. We can flip them over this way, or you can flip them over forward to back. So those are different types of pinching and strengthening activities. I had a student that could pull it off the paper and off the table and flip it, but he had a really hard time with just taking it and flipping it over this way. So those are some things you can do with cards. If you don't have a full deck of cards and you don't know what to do, if you have incomplete decks of cards, practice cutting. So cutting is not only good with paper, but it's great with cards or cardstock. It's helped to strengthen them. I move from usually cardstock, construction paper, up to even cardboard if I'm working on strengthening cutting skills. Puppets on the fingers are fun. Rubber bands, we can open and shut our hands and work on rubber bands. And another one of my favorites is pennies in a slot. So this is just an icing container. Lots of things you have around your house. This one is an old peanut butter container that has puff balls in it. We also have this one, has pennies in it. And so we're going to put the lid on. And then we have to practice taking the penny and putting it in the direction. So something like that over and over. We can take the pennies, lay them out on a table, flip them this way, flip them that way. We can turn them so they're all heads up the same direction. We can stack them. And if you've got, if you put the pennies on, say, like a piece of material or a little bit of a pillow, you can use actually some of the tongs or the clothespins to pick up the pennies and then have them put the penny in a jar. Probably wouldn't be so easy to put the penny inside the slot unless they're using their fingers, but certainly we can pick up things like mini erasers and just put those into the jar. So lots of fun activities there. We've got the mini eraser and we're dropping it into a jar. And of course, who doesn't love dumping a jar? So there's some more ideas for you. We're also looking at strengthening the hand arches. Like I said, hiding things in the putty. You can take toothpicks and stick the toothpicks in the putty and then find your little pony beads. So I don't know if you know, these are pony beads. And you can put 1 pony bead on each toothpick. You can put a pony bead in each one of these. You can do patterns with the mini erasers or the pony beads or the puff balls. Work on some math patterns, AB patterns, ABB patterns, ABC patterns, things like that. Using a plastic knife or a pizza cutter pie wheel to cut snakes of your hand therapy putty. Pouring rice or putting something into a student's hand is going to work on the arch. And squirreling. So if you don't know what squirreling is, I'm going to take this mini eraser and put it inside my arch. So it's hiding in here. And I'm going to pick up another one and I'm going to squirrel it and hide it in there. I'm going to pick up another one and squirrel it and hide it in there. And all these activities are helping the palmar arch. They're making the students stronger in their hand arches. And that's why I think it's so much fun. A lot of times we don't know why we're doing an activity. So this is just to help you kind of understand it's not just fine motor strengthening. There's a reason. These are activities for the hand arches. These are activities for handwriting specifically. Okay, let's move on. So we have time for questions at the end. Here's a couple of handouts that I have for fine motor exercises, towel scrunching, penny flips, inchworm, swirling I mentioned, using a hole punch, all sorts of fun cooking activities, constructing things, making arts and crafts, all those things are great for handwriting. Cutting activities, start with single snips. You can snip the putty, you can make fringe, you can make confetti, then work up to broader strips and cardstock, as I mentioned. Cutting on straight lines helps at first, but then we're going to cut on a curved line. And I'm going to jump a little ahead here and show you one of the things that you can do with cutting on a curve is our fun little Leggy liners. So these are the stamps I invented. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But if we take and make a curvy line, not only is it fun to write on, it's really fun to cut on too. And that dashed line in the middle gets a great activity for cutting. Okay, I have a list that's called Dollar Tree OT. These are some of the top 10 things I would get at the Dollar Tree. So things you can look for when you're shopping. The tweezers, the tongs, the clothespins, stickers. Stickers are great for fine motor pinch strength, pulling them off, putting them on, things like that. Your dice, your fidgets. Tops are great for spinning and working on that little fine motor pinch. Okay, so for the Leggy liners, let me just give you a quick little commercial here. Our largest is a 1 inch tall. It looks kind of like this, but it's red and it has a spaces pattern on it. And that is great for pre-K. Let me see if I have one here. And what we do with the spaces pattern is help teach that student spacing right from the beginning. So you can see here that it has a broken baseline, and we're going to teach line down. Then we're going to teach line across. This particular row, then we move into circles. This particular row is diagonals and crossing. And so that's our spaces stamp. Another one that's good for pre-K and younger is the boxes stamp. So this is great for letter boxes. And the way the Leggy liners work is they just roll out straight across the paper. And now we have a whole line of boxes there that we can practice writing letters in those boxes. As the student gets better at handwriting, then we would move down in size. And so our next size down is the 1/2 inch. So there's a single line and a double line. And what those do is just quickly draw a double line across the bottom, and we can have the student do some labeling, write out sentences or a song. And what's really cool about the Leggy liner, and one of my programs is every Wednesday I send out a free worksheet, is each worksheet can be used with any size Leggy liner. So if you're an OT and you have multiple students throughout the day, you can have one worksheet for all of your students from pre-K through high school based on what size of line you're going to draw for them. So if I had a high school student, I might use my little 3/8 inch, and that's a wide rule size line. And I can just quickly draw a couple of lines at the top. And this particular worksheet is called Karaoke Day. So I theme all my worksheets based on social media holidays like the Lighthouse. And then we had the Karaoke Day. The next one down here is Pioneer Day. So we can talk about Pioneer Day with pre-K all the way through high school students. And based on their level, what are they going to write about? Are they just going to write letters? Are they going to practice that spacing? Are they going to write words or sentences? And so those are some of the different techniques that we use. We do have specialty stamps like the worm line, which has the extra baseline. I'll show you that one real quick. Make sure I draw that right. So that's the worm line, it has that extra baseline for descending letters. And my favorite, one of our new ones, this is the shaded line. So this one gives them a shaded lower half of the line. And what that does is helps them to see where the fence is and where the lowercase letters go. So that's super fun with the Leggy liners as well. We have Leggy liners for math. We have the number line. We've got the small squares. We have the plain double line. There's the small squares. Small squares are great for data collection. They're great for ones, tens, and hundreds columns. Of course, we all know why number lines are great, but You can also use it for spacing letters. So if I had a student that didn't have good spacing, look, I can give them a number line here at the bottom and let's say 1 letter per space, one, and then skip a space. Start your next word over here, 1 letter per space. For that older student that doesn't want any baby lines at all, we do have the dotted grid. So this is a bullet journal stamp and it draws out dots on the background. And I'm going to try to write this over top of, here's a good one to do it on. We just did an Olympics worksheet. And I'm going to give you some dots on this paper. Here, let me do it without the background here. So you can see it's just these little itty bitty dots. And that gives an invisible background to the student to know how to line their letters up by writing across on the same line of dot or starting on the left at the same line of their dot. As an OT, I often didn't work on math or had opportunity a lot of times, even though they had legibility issues with their numbers, especially letter S and number 5. And so these little double-sided stamps, there's multiplication on one side and division on the other side. And you're going to pull it down on the paper and you get a quick math problems. And so then we can practice the legibility of writing the numbers and practice their math, doing their alignment. So that's a fun one too. And I do want to make a mention of our cube. This is a 6-in-1 stamp. This pattern is great for letter formations. You can do X's and Z's and N's and diagonal letters. This one's great for sizing your A's and B's and tall H and short N and things like that. Does have a handwriting line on it as well. Has the number line for spacing. And it has a letter box, brand new. We've just launched with the dashed line in the middle. And so when I roll that out, then we've got those boxes with the dashed line in the middle. So those are some of the Legi liners, and we do one for music, and we have all those fun free worksheets. So let me finish up my slides here. There's 20 different patterns. We have single line of boxes. We've got math stamps, as I mentioned. In my handouts, which I will send you a link to, there are more free resources on my website page. There's an ability to shop for the Legi liners as well. They start at $15. And this is our final video. I just want to show you the beginning of this with Mandy. And what do you remember about the first few times that we met, Court?
It was always so fun, and you had me right, and I remember my handwriting being totally horrible, but now I can actually write pretty decent sentences.
Oh, good. After this school year, then how is that playing out this school? Do you have any stories of anything that happened during those school year?
These last couple of weeks, I've actually been writing longer stories.
Awesome. What do your teachers think about that?
My teacher put a note on my report card that I've been working so hard and that my handwriting is getting really better.
Awesome. And what does that translate into a score? You said you got a 1 and then a 2. Where are you at now?
3.
Awesome. So just a little over a year and a few months.
Yep. So one of the big things that jumped out to me was curriculum night at the beginning of the school year. So it was a few weeks into the school year. He was super excited for me to see something he'd written at school that was hanging on the wall. He was really proud. He was like, I worked really hard. I really took my time. Wait until you see my handwriting. So that was just a fun thing for us to look forward to. I feel like it turned something that maybe we were both feeling frustration over into something really positive that he could show me. And his grade to dramatically have improved. And then that's the only thing she remarked on was she's seeing a huge improvement in his handwriting and his speed and pace of his writing. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was definitely the neatness and him taking his time. So that was a really big deal.
And what do you remember about the first? Okay, so I don't have time to show you the whole video, but I did want to mention that you could see how much more confident he was and excited to write. when we're working on motivating students, there's 5 Ps we want to work on. So as a therapist or a teacher, you want to, what is the perception of the handwriting before, during, and after? And we're going to look at the student's handwriting perception and the mother. Then we're going to do some practical exercises. As a mom, you can sit down and talk about your perception with your student as well. But what are the expectations? So are we going to work 5 minutes a day? Are we going to work 15 minutes a day? Are we going to work an hour a day? What is the expectation? And so using some of these proven techniques that OTs across the country are using that are working to help improve their handwriting are really good. Lots of different resources and things on Google that you can find handouts for. Make sure we're always being positive, and then discuss the progress with the student. And as mom, you can discuss that with your student, but teachers and OTs, discuss it with your student. Don't just report on how they're doing. Talk with them, how much greater they're doing, things like that. So and then just for motivation, make it fun, functional, these types of activities that I showed you, making things competitive, repetitive, creative, easy, and short. Make sure we chunk things. That's going to help motivate that student. Make it relevant. If they don't like Star Wars, then don't play with Star Wars things. If they don't like spacemen, but if they like fruit, use fruit. Like, use things that motivate them. In order to space, find something online that they like and make it a little tiny picture and just use that thing to space it. I had a student that loved Disney, so we used a lot of Disney things. I just printed off pictures from Google. We wrote about Disney a lot. As he got into high school, we worked on writing a job application for Disney, things like that. Where are you writing? Vary where you're writing. We don't always write sitting. We can write laying down. We can write standing up. Use technology to research on the iPad. What is this activity that is we want to write about? We're going to write about the Olympics. Let's find something. Let's find a picture. Let's find a sport on the iPad, but then writing about it on paper. And of course, to use Legiliners. Legiliners are very motivating for students. They like to draw their own lines. Even if they're crooked, the kids can still write on a crooked line. All the stamps are refillable ink, and it's an oil-based ink, and it won't dry out. So this is where we see success, and make sure, like I said, reinforce your practicing, give them feedback, regular communication. So I want to take questions at this point. This is something else that I have, is just some lesson plans that go with my worksheets, some different more free resources. These are all going to be in the handouts at the end of the handouts, games for the reluctant writer. So are there any other questions? Do we want to put them in the chat? Do we want to come back online? What's the best idea what to do here, Lauren?
Yeah, so I just want to give a huge thank you to you, Polly. That was a fantastic presentation. So much great information. And I know that we're at time, but we do want to have a chance for questions. So if you want to put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, just so they're easier for us to find, we'll give you a couple minutes to type those out for us, and Polly can answer them.
Sure. So while they're doing that, I will have a link to the handouts. So all those QR codes, you'll be able to download those later and be able to use those for those fun free resources. And I'm just looking to see what else my little tips and tricks and things I have all around. Oh, buttons. Buttons are always fun. Got some buttons here. We can string the buttons and pick them up and hide them in the putty.
Oh, yes, you are able to receive a certificate. Sorry to cut you off, Polly. I just
okay.
saw a question come in. You can receive a certificate of attendance if you email us at info@ldaamerica.org to request a certificate, and we will create one to send to you. I'll put the email in the chat.
Okay. Looks like one of the Q&A that's come in is, what are my favorite strategies to assist students that write with heavy pressure? One of my favorites is to use a mechanical pencil. And as long as the student can tolerate that they learn to write lighter because they're not pressing as hard. We can also put a different surface behind. So if they write really heavy, a lot of times we give them a softer surface. And that will change the way that their pencil comes out on the paper. The other thing that with heavy pressure is there are different types of pencil lead. So if the student's very heavy, you might want to try different pencil lead. You might want to try a different, like a marker versus a colored pencil versus a crayon. There's things like that. So when I said someone asked about medium letters, I'm talking about medium height letters. There's the tall letters, the short letters, and then the underground letters. Some people say tall, small, and fall. So that's when I mentioned medium questions. So what do I suggest for a student who doesn't write at all and gets emotional when asked to do it? So yes, that's a tough one, but ideally you want to be able to motivate that student because it can be fun. And so maybe drawing out their own leggy lines they would enjoy writing for that. Maybe if we can make the leggy line curvy, use a piece of adding tape paper. So the adding tape is like that long skinny paper, and do a curvy line on there and let them write out on there. Let them practice letters, let them match letters, do fine motor letters, do things that are active and engaging, things that would motivate them. If we can set a timer, sometimes that'll help a student. If we're just going to write for 5 minutes. My son was a reluctant writer, and he wasted all his time. He would say, I've been working on my homework for 30 minutes. But when I actually watched him, he would get up and get a drink, or he would go let the dog out, or he would break his pencil and have to go find another thing. And so he wasn't really working for that 30 minutes. And so I would try to keep the emotions in check, and I would try to kind of say, well, what do you want to do? And give that student a little more control. So that might help as well. Okay, and I think we'll take one more question. You have a child that struggles to push things. For example, he can't push the white top of a whipped cream can and get it to come out. He can use his thumb, but not his first finger. What do I do to help with this? Is this a double jointed issue? I can't tell you if it's a double jointed issue or not, because I don't see the child and I don't know. I didn't work a lot with double jointed, but if the index finger is weak, then we're going to want to do a lot of pinching activities. So on your clothespin, opening and closing, and making sure that they're not substituting and using multiple fingers, or that they're using their whole finger. You really want to force them to use just the tippy tops of their fingers. We can also adapt that particular whipped cream can. So where they're holding it with one hand and using a little bit more of their wrist and shoulder elbow strength to make that go. The fact that it's upside down and trying to spray it out is going to be harder for that student. But if you can isolate that finger pushing motion, and I would see that would be a huge reward for the student if they get to push out their whipped cream and eat it. So, you know, we always get whipped cream on ice cream, and so they're going to get extra practice because they get a nice reward at the end. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer on email. I'm happy to, you know, talk with someone one-on-one. I'm approachable. I'm here. I'm practicing therapist. I love helping people. So if anyone has an email, they can email me, polly@leggyliner.com, and I'm happy to even set up a phone consultation, no charge. So
Thank you so much, Polly, for sharing your awesome expertise today. And thank you for everybody else who joined us. You will get the replay within 1 to 2 days. Great,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Bye.